Welcome to the Open Apple Podcast, where we celebrate the Apple II. Whether you're a longtime user, a nostalgic visitor, or a newcomer to the community, join us as we share news and memories of Steve Wozniak's most famous personal computer.
Hello and welcome to Open Apple. This is episode 42 for December 2014. I am your co-host number 1, Quinn Dunkey, and with me as always is co-host number 2, Mike McGinnis. How are you doing, Mike?
That's me. I'm sub-commander co-host. So how have you been?
I've been good. My new job's been keeping me busy, which is very exciting, and been managing to find some time for retro computing stuff, so that's good too.
That's even awesomer.
Yeah, I'm working on a new project with my 2C that I'm very excited about, which I'll be talking about later. How about you?
You keep hinting about that. I'm starting to get very, very curious. The need to know is building up.
Well, I've actually got a hardware project and a software project. I think the software project is going to have to wait till Kansas Fest because it's a big one, and I'm only half done, and it's about halfway to the next K-Fest, so I've got my work cut out for me, but I think it's going to be fun, so I'm keeping that one under wraps for now. But I think the hardware one, the cat's out of the bag on that one.
Well, I'm sure the software one will be amazing. For those of you listening at home, obviously this is our annual roundtable. We decided to continue the tradition from years prior. I think it goes all the way back to when Ryan Swinaga was doing A2 Unplugged, actually, and Ken and I thought it would be a good idea to continue it, and then Quinn and I thought it would be a good idea to continue. So here we are, but you'll notice that my voice is conspicuously or perhaps unconspicuously absent from the interview, the roundtable, and that's because, I sometimes get migraines, and I don't want to get too much into the health stuff, but basically when I get one of those, I'm pretty much down for the count, and not a lot I could do about that. And it was just a matter of scheduling everybody, and it was, we weren't going to be able to move anybody else. So I will be hearing this as I'm editing, but in the meantime, I am as excited as the rest of you listeners to hear how it went.
Yeah, and I can attest that Mike sounds very funny when he's on those medications.
She called me the next day, I think, and I was a little bit loopy, more than usual anyway.
Well, now you've ruined the illusion that we had all these people here in the studio with us doing this roundtable.
I don't think there was ever an illusion of that.
Oh, I don't know. I think everyone up till now has believed that we have a big, elaborate Open Apple studio with, like, the pointy foam on the walls and, like, fancy monitors and stuff.
Well, I do have the palatial mountain estate, the Open Apple Rocky Mountain, I like to call it.
Yes.
The getaway, but...
Open Apple World Headquarters.
Right, yes. At least in my mind, I do.
Yeah, we're all there right now.
Sure.
Hi, Sarah. Speaking of our roundtable, why don't we roll on into that?
All right, here we go.
Old or new, it's still cool in Retro Views.
So next on our show, we've got a bit of an Open Apple tradition. We like to do a roundtable at the end of each year, which was where we just round up a few of the community members. Some folks you may know, some folks you may not, and we just have a little fun. We ask some questions, we see what people think, what people are looking forward to, what they're up to, and all of that jazz. So tonight in our roundtable, we've got Eric Sheppy-Shepherd, and Sarah, oh my gosh, Sarah, I'm going to butcher your last name, so I won't even attempt it, and Carrington Vanston. So let's start by going around the table and tell us a little bit about yourself. So we'll start with you, Eric.
So I've been going by Sheppy among the Apple II crowd since, 1991? Oh my God. That's a long time. And so I've been programming Apple IIs since I was a kid, and got really into it in college and became kind of like this guy who made a lot of utilities that people liked and stuff. So I have been well known in the community for a while for that reason, and also the fact that I just won't go away.
Awesome. All right. And Sarah, you're up.
I'm a longtime listener, first-time caller. This year was my first Kansas Fest, which was really awesome. Some of you may know me from running my Apple II Ornament Workshop, and I also recently reacquired my Apple IIe a couple years ago, so I've been playing games and looking at old programs and documents, and I recently just installed my Super Serial card, which I'm very excited about.
Awesome. All right. Carrington Vanston, you are up.
I am a cult of personality.
True.
Oh, we know.
I am your biggest follower.
And I am a podcaster and longtime user and fan of the Apple II. And I am occasionally also stuck with Mike on microphones.
Yes, the infamous No Quarter. I've got a bit of a bone to pick with No Quarter. Mike actually closed our show with your trailing bumper last month, which
He closed one of our episodes, though, with drop 3 inches. So
oh, perfect. Well,
he just does it. It's a round table.
full circle. So as soon as he closes drop 3 inches with Open Apple, then the circle is complete.
The circle of life.
It's the circle of life.
This is the circle of Apple. Okay, so let's get into some questions here. I'm going to be moderating our panel of rogues, and let's get started here. I'll start with some easy ones, and then I'm going to get into the hard-hitting journalism a little bit later. First question: what was your first Apple II, and what happened to it? Sheppy, go.
I'm going to go with the first one in my family, in my house, and that was it was actually, we were living overseas, and my dad bought a Data Mini 1 Apple II Plus 2E hybrid clone thing. It was actually a pretty neat machine, and that was what I used for a very, very long time, way longer than normal. And I actually still have it. It's in a box, and several of the keys are badly stuck, but as far as I know, it still works.
Awesome. What was the name of that thing again?
Data Mini 1. DATAMINI.
Wow, I have never heard of that. Has anybody else heard of that?
It was a really neat little machine. It had some really cool features.
So it was a 2 Plus clone, but had some...
It was a 2 Plus clone, except that it had it had lowercase support, and it had a built-in Z80 card built onto the logic board, and a bunch of other stuff. It was really, it was kind of like halfway in between the 2 Plus and the original 2E in terms of what was built into it, and then it went a little beyond that in some weird directions.
That's cool. I thought I knew all the Apple II clones, but that is a new one. Huh. All right. So, Sarah, tell us about your first Apple II and what happened to it.
Well, my first Apple II is the Apple IIe that we had growing up, and as some of you may know the story, a couple of years ago, Ken and I believe Mike were driving together across the country, and they actually picked it up for me, so it is now back in my apartment, and it's actually my only official Apple II that I've owned. We also had a few at school back in the day, but yes, it's still alive and kicking.
So they picked it up from your parents' house, or it was stored somewhere?
Yeah, it was in my parents' basement, and I quizzed my siblings, and everybody said, sure, it's cool if you take it, because we don't want it, so it's mine now, ha ha ha.
And they all said, you want the what?
Pretty much. My brother actually took it for a couple of years. He went to some kind of electronics training and fussed with it, but apparently the guts are still good, because they still work, so it didn't do too much damage.
Very cool. Was it all yellow, or did it still look good?
Mine was beige, so it looks pretty much the same to me, but I wish we had, for the Apple II with the retro bright community, those cards you get when you whiten your teeth, what the color's supposed to be. So
yes, right.
It looks okay to me, but I don't actually know. It's beige, but it was originally beige. I didn't have the fancy platinum or anything like that.
Right on. Yeah, I've got a couple Apple IIs that I'm wondering if I should retro bright, but I don't have the guts to, because I don't really know how far off they are. The change is so gradual that I'm a little scared to attempt that. All right, Carrington, you're up. First Apple II, and what happened to it?
To be honest, I don't know what happened to it. I know my first Apple II was an Apple II. I think it was a 2 Plus. Maybe it was an original 2. It's so long ago. I'm so old. We
know.
I believe it was my third computer, though. But it was the first one that I understood and really did something with. So it meant everything to me. So you would think I would know what happened to it, but I don't. It probably got sold. I know I had done a bunch of upgrades on it, and then at some point I was at university and I didn't own it anymore. So it went away. Mm-hmm. Alas.
Do you know what happened to your hair?
Yeah, it also went away.
Yeah.
So
it was actually a part of a bundle deal with the computer.
Oh, okay.
Sold at a garage sale, 99 cents.
So all gone.
Creepiest eBay auction ever.
Yeah. of that year.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, so I guess I'll fill in for Mike as the fourth panelist. My first Apple II was our family's 2 Plus, and it is still in my parents' basement. And one of these days, I'm going to get over there and dig it out. All right, so that was the easy ones. Now we get to some juicy, interesting ones. Oh, no, I lied. I have one more softball. All right, let me lob this one at you guys. What was Apple II news, event, or product are you looking forward to in 2015? Shep, you go.
I don't know if I could name something specific. I'm just always fascinated to see what the hardware guys come up with next. I'm a software guy. Like, everybody knows that, none of us remember these days, but you know how back in the old days, the computer would be in one room and the operators were kept away from it in another room for fear of damaging the equipment? Yeah. That's me, totally. They don't let me actually into the same room with computers because I might hurt them.
Awesome.
And so, hardware kind of fascinates me that way. And so I'm always looking forward to seeing what comes next.
So do you sit as far away from the keyboard as you can?
No, ironically enough, I hunch over them, which is probably why I have like 18 broken keyboards in my office.
Maybe you need some sort of lead shield between you and the computer just to make sure you don't unduly influence it in some way. All right, Sarah, anything you're looking forward to this year?
Yeah, I'm actually hoping to go to Kansas Fest again. I'm probably about like 75-80% certainty, just based on a couple of things, like how much vacation time I can get and some logistics, but it looks like I'm going to be able to go, so I'm very excited about that.
Are you going to be running another session like this year?
I don't know. We were actually just talking about that before the call, and I don't know if I have anything else to run. I guess I could run my session again, but we'll see how it goes.
That's worth thinking about. I mean, I think there might be some people who didn't attend your session but didn't realize how awesome it was going to be because a couple of us finished our ornaments and others were very jealous when they saw them.
Yes, that's true. I'll have to decide if the only downside is if I bring stuff with me, then I have less room for parts. And I still have like my disk drive I forgot to bring that I still need to fix and fun stuff like that. But we'll see what happens.
And for our listeners who may not know, Sarah ran a session at K-Fest this year where we got to make ornaments with this sort of plastic canvas cross-stitch technique. And so we got to make little Apple IIe's, including optional duo disk drives. And they hang on a little string for your holiday tree or your Festivus pole or whatever you might like to hang it from. And it was lots of fun to make.
Or in my case, it would be my Carrington stick. It stands in the corner and I hang ornaments on it. And then I bow down and worship the Carrington.
Yeah, that's a good point. I could put it on my Carrington altar. It does need a little something on that one corner.
I did say cult of personality.
Yeah. Mostly I like.
Machine?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, mostly I like the candles. So those I keep those lit as a vigil.
That is acceptable.
Yeah. So speaking of the devil, Carrington.
Like Sheppy, I am a software guy, and so like Sheppy, I admire and am in awe of the hardware guys and gals who do these things that I'm like, how did that become a thing? So often what I'm looking forward to most of all is what people will make that's physical and hardware. So that would be the case now. The things top of my mind are the Ethernet 2, which has been bumped to the end of next year, so I can look forward to it all the way until November of 2015. And I want to get another CFA 3000 board. Oh, no, sorry, that's the one I guess has been bumped to November. Everything's been bumped till forever. But Ethernet 2 and CFFA 3000 redo. I'm keen on those. And sort of related to the Apple II, I'm excited about the 6502-based hobbyist development board that got sort of talked about at Kansas Fest, the one from WDC. So when that comes out, I want one and I want to play with it.
Yeah, once again, for anyone who was not at K-Fest, I sort of made an informal announcement on behalf of Western Design Center that they're making an Arduino-style hobbyist electronic board based around the 6502, which, of course, they still make. And it looks like a really, really cool board. Good answer from everyone. My answer, I guess, is similar to a lot of you. Also being a software person, hardware is quite a bit of magic to me, and I'm quite excited about what Reactive Micro is up to these days. They're kind of back from their slumber with a bang. They're making some awesome stuff, including remaking the Transwarp card, which I think is just utterly fantastic. So really looking forward to that. It will surely decimate the Transwarp market on eBay. And also definitely looking forward to K-Fest. I've got it blocked out in my calendar, so very excited for that. All right, so let's do some more interesting questions, shall we? If you were forced to trade in your Apple II for a different retro computer, what would it be and why? Eric, you're up.
Let's see. If I had to do that, I would probably be looking at like one of the like mid-range Cray models, maybe, or something like that. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I need an enormous supercomputer for my new house.
That is not an answer I was expecting, but I love it. Wow. Okay. I used to do IT for Silicon Graphics, and it was right at the tail end of the acquisition of Cray, and so I got to play with some of the later models like the T3 and whatnot, and the liquid cooled ones were really cool because in order to fix a hard drive or to update RAM or anything, you had to drain the coolant out of them first. So it was very much like working on a car. The RAM change procedure required a bucket. So how about you, Sarah? If you had to pick a different retro computer, what would it be?
It probably counts as cheating to say I would just trade in my Apple II for an Apple II GS because I never had one, and it's all fancy and upgradey.
Sorry, still an Apple II.
I know.
That is cheating.
But if I couldn't do that,
I don't believe that's cheating at all. She is trading in an Apple II for another retro
Says the Sweet 16 guy.
For a different retro
y'all
computer.
and your fancy Apple II GSs. No, but if I couldn't have one of those, then I'd probably go with like an Atari or a C64 just because I never had one and just to have exposure to it and get a chance to play with it and try something different.
All right, I'll buy that. What do you think you would do with either one of those, let's say?
Probably the same thing I do with my Apple II, learn to write some code and play games on it and maybe compare and contrast, like, well, how does this game work if there are games that were ported to both?
Plus, you could get a lot of reading done, while waiting for your Commodore to load anything.
That's true, and I could probably make a model of it, which technically I actually kind of owe somebody one that's on my list of backlog projects. But I still need to get some source pictures, so I'm working on that.
My favorite part of your answer is it gave me a chance to make a dig at Commodore.
Yes.
Any chance I can get.
Always.
Yes. Carrington, caveat on your answer cannot be Atari 800 either.
Well, it wouldn't be. I do have one of those.
Exactly.
And so it wouldn't be fair. I, like Sheppy, would probably lean towards Big Iron. If it has to be something, then I'll take the Univac. But the reality is, if we're a more straightforward answer, I think would be if I was like straight ahead normal, not like I'll take an Apple I and then I'll buy all the other computers.
Ooh, that's a good answer. I want that answer.
There you go.
Probably. No, I think, honestly, I think I'd say the TRS-80 Model 3. I like the industrial design of it. It looks like the kind of computer that I like. So, yeah, if I had to play around with one, it's that. But honestly, nothing would make me happy like an Apple II does.
Fair enough. Good answers. Yeah, I guess my choice would probably be an Amiga 500, I think. That's sort of... Amigas are one of those computers that I always was super, super interested in and jealous of people that had them at the time, but just could never get access to one. And I've always been really interested in them. There's the hardware on them is so interesting. So one of these days, I think I might just have to try and track one of those down. All right. Let's see. Moving along. How about this one? Which Apple II model do you like the least and why? Sheppy.
That one's actually pretty easy for me. It is and I'm going to get all kinds of, I'm going to get like hate mail for it, but it's the original 5 1/4 inch models. And I mean all of them, all the 5 1/4 inch models of the Apple IIc. I hate them.
Ah, interesting. Okay.
I mean, I would hate them, but I've had nothing but problems every time I tried to use one.
Wow. So what kind of problems?
Drive reliability. I had terrible times where, I'd take a disk that worked on every other computer on the planet and put it in the 2C and it wouldn't.
Did you test every computer on the planet?
Yes, I actually did.
Shenanigans.
And in fact, the reason why that one time your back door was open...
I knew it.
It's because I was there testing my disk on your computer.
That entire sentence was euphemisms, by the way. Start to end, all euphemisms.
Yes, but I'm not going to tell you for what.
Yeah, good. Way to raise the bar there, Carrington.
He's good at that.
Yeah. Well, we're all going to get hate mail for that one. The Apple IIc is among the most beloved of the Apple IIs.
And it's so pretty.
It is, including by Woz himself. He has said that the 2C is his favorite.
I know. Everybody loves the 2C but me.
Wow. Well, you can send your hate mail to mmcginnis at yahoo.com.
And I do.
Yeah, as do we all. All right, moving along. Sarah, what is your least favorite Apple II and why?
It's hard to say because I don't know that I know all the Apple IIs yet, which I probably shouldn't admit. But I guess maybe the Apple II Plus because it does less than the one that I have.
Fair. That's a fair answer.
The unenhanced 2E because it's just cooler, I guess. I still don't know what that means actually. So if somebody knows, I'd love to hear what the enhanced, like how is it enhanced? But
well, in fact, we can educate you on that very fact. So the 2E enhanced, let's see, someone help me out here because the details I'm a little fuzzy on. So the 2E enhanced comes with the...
It's got the, it comes with the 65 CO2.
128K of RAM.
And the
80 column card
extended 80 column card. Yeah, those are.
80 column. You gotta have the.
And it's got a different ROM to support those, but otherwise, I think that's about it.
Oh, and double because of the extra RAM and stuff. It does the double high res.
Right.
Graphics.
Yeah, and it's got the extra character sets as well. So it's got the most text and all that cool stuff.
Yeah, I'd definitely be sad without that. So I guess the unenhanced 2E or the 2. I think the 2 Plus was before that.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good answer. I mean, the 2 Plus it sort of has its own charm, and it was certainly the best of the early 2s, and the 2E Enhanced is a great all-around machine, but the 2E Unenhanced is sort of in a weird middle ground where it's not quite fancy enough for the latest software. But Carrington, how about you?
I am going to pick the 2GS for 2 reasons.
Gasp!
It always seems like, I know, what a shocker. I'm really an 8-bit guy, and the 2GS seems like a dumbed-down Macintosh. But mostly I'm picking it because Sheppy picked on the 2C, and so I'm going to pick the 2GS.
Wow.
Nothing if not
I'll
spiteful.
meet you out back after the show.
More euphemisms from Sheppy.
That makes me feel better about not having the fancy schmancy GS now. So, like, I have the enhanced 2E, so it's a little better. It's like mid-range.
Okay, so that's good, though. I can cross Carrington off my Christmas list.
And there's so much that could be talked about after that discussion. That's really interesting. I mean, after that round, there's a lot of debate that could come just out of that.
Yeah, I'm not loving the lack of love for the 2GS from Carrington because that's my favorite too by a long shot. It was my it was my dream machine, and I was the happiest. It was
the first computer I bought for myself.
Yeah. Oh, I was so ecstatic when I got that thing, and it's to this day the favorite of any machine I've ever owned. Just it had a sort of sense of wonder about it that I don't think I've gotten from a computer since.
Yeah, I wonder sometimes if that sense of wonder and that sense of awesomeness would have persisted if it hadn't been the last, the most advanced model. If there'd been another machine after, an Apple II XL or whatever you want to call it, if it would have changed the perception of the 2GS. Would the people who were like, oh, that's that last one that had all that whiz bangery, we don't like whiz bangery, would those people view the GS differently in that circumstance, that kind of thing? I wonder.
Maybe because it's an outlier when it comes to the Apple II line.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I wonder also because nowadays computers, of course, have ever increasingly amazing specs, but it doesn't inspire a sense of wonder because it's like, well, my graphics card has 1,000 more polygons now or whatever it does. It's just not a big deal. But I think for me, it was the first computer that did impressive things. It had real sound and real graphics, and so I think in some sense it's just sort of relative to the other Apple IIs, it was so amazing because older Apple IIs were all pretty heavy on the compromises,
Yeah, well, and I look at it like the GS. It was for me literally the first and the last time that a computer was an enormous leap forward from the previous generation. Right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Everything before and everything since has been just iteration. Now, rapid iteration that has gone amazing places, but still just iteration.
Yeah, I agree totally. The GS, a line was crossed there. The fidelity of the graphics and the sound and everything. It was the first time where we got, I think, a taste of what computers were going to do. So it was such a huge leap over the 2E that it was really something. I mean, there was this sort of second wave of computers. I guess you might call them the 16-bit wave, the Amiga and Atari ST, and they had such amazing graphics. The fact that you could just show any color on any pixel you wanted for the most part, and you could just play sounds and they didn't sound horrible, and that sort of almost completely uncompromising multimedia experience. So the GS was kind of late to that party, but by far, the first kind of time it came to an Apple. So that was pretty amazing, I think, at the time. And it was, like I say, the earlier Apple IIs were really heavy on compromise. Well, it had color graphics, but it was 4 or 6 kind of weird colors, and you couldn't show them on anywhere you wanted, and there was weird artifacts, and it was all very compromising. And yes, it had sound, but it was really terrible, and you couldn't play it without stalling the CPU, and it was just really heavy on the compromises. Whereas the GS, aside from the clock speed, which was certainly too low, which could certainly be fixed with a transwarp, everything else was just really quite uncompromising, I think, from a media standpoint.
Yeah, you kids and your newfangled GSs with your color and your... I'm monochrome, so I'm like, back when I was your age, I had a monochrome computer and we liked it. I had to carry it to school both ways.
Uphill in the snow.
Exactly.
Yeah, the GS was also, from a hardware standpoint, distinctly modern in a lot of ways. The CPU supported modern operating system constructs, relocatable code and programmable interrupts, and even some limited preemptive multitasking and so on was possible. Some real memory management was possible. So it was definitely a line being crossed from computers as a one thing at a time toy to a system of tools that could be used, in a complicated way. So, Carrington, you see,
You're all wrong.
You just haven't seen the GS light.
I have seen it, and it's a blue light around the edge of the monitor, and it drives me crazy.
But border effects, come on, that FTA Christmas demo is just face melting.
Nah, see, I'm coming from a different place where my love of the vintage Apple IIs is all about their difference from the Macs and PCs I sit in front of all day. And maybe it's a GSOS thing or something, but to me, it's just that seems like an old, not great version of what I use every day versus I want it to be a command line. I want it to be like the best of the older type thing, not the first of the new type thing that I'm on now.
Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it with GSOS is that it did things at the time that shouldn't have been possible on the hardware they were doing it on. Things with the support for multiple file systems all at the same time, and some of the impressive things they were doing with interrupt-driven events and things like that. They were able to make it work in a way that it shouldn't have been able to. There were things it did faster than Mac's 2-3 times the processor speed, and print drivers that were vastly superior to those on the Mac, things like that. So it was really an interesting place for it to be, and I wonder often how it would have evolved further if Apple had chosen to go that way.
Yeah, I agree. It felt like at the time, we talked about how the GS was sort of the end of the line, but at the time it felt like the start of something. It felt like those of us who used it, when they were still new, it felt like the next big thing. And of course, little did we know, especially those of us who weren't really in the loop on Apple's politics, little did we know, how doomed it was. But it felt like, oh, this is so amazing. I can't wait to see where they go with this.
Yeah.
Turns out they went nowhere.
In retrospect, looking back on it with multiple decades of maturity, I guess you could call it, I see that it was that discontinuing the Apple II was probably the only right move they could make. They may not have handled it as well as they should have. In fact, absolutely they should have handled it differently. But given the technology available at the time, trying to stretch the capabilities of the Apple II any farther would have limited them in ways that could have doomed Apple over the long haul, I think. And that's a controversial statement for an Apple II junkie like me to say, but I think it's probably true.
Yeah, I agree completely. It was, again, I'm going to get hate mail for saying this, but it was a dead-end architecture. It really was. You won't
get hate mail from me.
The 65XX architecture just wasn't going anywhere. The 816 was a good chip, but it wasn't a fully modern chip in the way that, the x86 chips and 68000s and so on were. So.
Now, I think that could have been totally different if RISC-style architectures had existed at the time. They could have done something where it had an Apple II emulation mode, but then switched into a fully 32-bit Uber mode, that was totally unrelated to classic Apple IIs. But then would it have really been an Apple II anymore? And that's a question. But it's still, they possibly could have continued the line in some respect that way. But given what they had available at the time, it just wasn't feasible.
Yeah, and to Carrington's point, if you view it from, say, a GSOS kind of GUI point of view, yeah, it's just sort of like a crappy old Mac, and I definitely get that. I mean, I'm not particularly interested in old Macs for that reason, for that same reason. It just feels like using a crappy old version of my current computer, and that isn't very interesting. But my experience with the GS was primarily as a game machine and as a demo playing machine, the Ninja Force demos and Delta and so on, and I was quite into that. And also just, as a tool for learning to program, my machine didn't boot into GSOS. I booted it into the GNO environment and the Orca set of tools. So, it was definitely a different experience from that standpoint. I was never a huge fan of GSOS either. I used it for a few things when necessary, but it wasn't certainly my choice. So how about you, Sarah? Any thoughts on all that?
No, not really. I think we're all definitely not hardware people, so... And a lot of that stuff I just wasn't really exposed to. But I think I could kind of see the sentiment of feeling like it's like your Mac style. But it's this funny thing, even going to Kansas Fest this year, of I always felt like, I just have this little Apple II, and, maybe someday I'll have a Duodesk. I'm like, people have them, and it still feels so fancy. These fancy GSs and these fancy color monitors. So, but it's like I could actually get one now, so...
If somebody showed up at Kansas Fest with, an original Apple II, or 2 Plus, but an original Apple II even more so, it would be like the GS people would be all hovering around it, all curious about it, because, Then
we could take their GSs while they're not looking.
Because, I personally have never even seen an original Apple II.
Me too.
Yeah, me neither.
An original.
The first Apple I ever used was a 2 Plus. They had them at school, but I never actually saw an original 2. And so if I saw one of those at Kansas Fest, I'd be all over it.
Yeah, I'm the same way, actually. I'm trying to talk Mike into bringing his Rev Zero Apple II to K-Fest because I want to see it.
That would be sweet.
Yeah, I just think it's neat to be exposed to different things, just to see what they looked like and see how they interacted, even if they're annoying or boring. So that's fun for me, just to get the range of what all the old tools were like. But, back in college, we were using more Xterms and DEC terminals. So I think that's probably the closest I had to that Windows/command line.
Cool. Well, good answers from everybody except Carrington. That was a fun question. All right, my next question. Let's see. Name a piece of Apple II software that you loved that nobody else seems to have heard of. I think we all have one of these. Eric?
Oh, gosh. Oh. I actually have no idea because I don't know what other people haven't heard of.
You could make it up.
Yeah, or something really obscure that you used or liked that you don't see around.
Fleam Writer.
Fleam Writer? What's that?
You said I could make something up.
Oh. Don't listen to Carrington.
Yeah, probably.
Do not listen to Carrington.
I'm just going to turn off his mic.
You know what? Come back to me. I got to think about this.
All right, yeah, I'm picking on you as first all the time, which isn't very fair. So, all right, we'll flip it around. Carrington, go.
I think Sarah and I like the fact that you went with him first every time.
I actually kind of like it too normally, but this time, no, I don't.
I don't know how obscure it is because I think I talked about it on one of my podcasts, but for me, it's the game, quote-unquote game called Portal, by Activision. Not the Portal that everybody played a few years ago, which was great as well, part of the Orange Box, but the old, essentially interactive novel that came out for the Apple II and other computers as well. It rocked my world and sort of changed the way I viewed fiction and especially interactive fiction. It was huge and mind-blowing, and nobody seems to know it or play it, and I adore it. And it never shows up on eBay. Believe me, I constantly look.
Well, that's a great answer. The only reason I know that game is because Jimmy Marr over at the Digital Antiquarian recently did an article on that game, and when I saw it, I had never heard of it. And you're the only other person I've ever heard of mention it.
That's why I picked it. It's obscure.
Do you, Erica and Sarah, do you know that game? Have you played it or seen
Actually, I
it?
haven't.
I've heard Carrington talk about it, but that's it.
I am its champion.
He may have made it up.
There's a good chance.
He's planted the seeds of it all over the internet so that Jimmy could find them and write an article about it unknowingly.
Yep.
Evil man. Sarah, how about you?
Well, actually, if you'd asked me 4 months ago, I would have said The Coveted Mirror by Penguin Software, which is actually my favorite game pretty much ever. But now, having gone to Kansas Fest and meeting people that have heard of it was also just very awesome. And but the second obscure software we had was The Spy's Adventures in North America, which was kind of a knockoff Carmen Sandiego, which I think was either Penguin or Polarware had gotten bought out by them. But we had a lot of fun with that, and I don't remember anybody else talking about it.
Wow, another good answer. And actually another one that was recently covered by Jimmy Marr over at the Digital Antiquarian. It's a great blog, obviously.
Oh, cool. Let's go check that out.
And yeah, so he did a story on Carmen Sandiego, and at least I think it was his blog. There was a story on Carmen Sandiego, and one of the commenters posted sort of an alternate perspective on the whole story of that game, because there's quite a bit of drama between the creators of Carmen Sandiego and creators of that game you just mentioned, whose name I've already forgotten.
Spy's Adventures in North America.
Yes, Spy's Adventures in North America. I guess one of the Spy's Adventures creators had the idea first, and the details, of course, are contested, but apparently they had made this game and had suggested it to Broderbund, and they said no, and then 3 or 4 weeks later, some short amount of time later, Carmen Sandiego came out, and yeah, it was all quite a bit of drama there. I guess there was some lawsuits and still some bitterness to this day, and there's some competing kind of entries on the internet about the history of each product, and they differ in some interesting details, so we may never know the truth of exactly what happened there, but excellent choice.
Wow, I didn't know there was so much drama. I'll have to go check that out.
Yeah, head over to Jimmy Marr's blog. I will try and find a link to that for the show notes if I can. All right, Sheppy, you've had time to think. What do you got for us?
The original Crush, Crumble, and Chomp, the great movie monster game. It was remade sometime later, but I'm talking like way back, like early 1980s and 81, 82 time frame. We had it on the computer at school and got to play it from time to time. It was awesome.
I do remember that game. That one of my friends in school had that game, and it was one of the few games that I never managed to actually copy, despite many attempts with Copy 2 Plus and Locksmith and so on. So I just ended up borrowing it as much as I could. But yeah, that one was really great, actually. If I'm thinking of the right game, it had sort of an isometric view of the city.
Yeah.
And you were controlling the big movie monsters, and you just kind of ran around crushing things. Yeah, it was.
You went around and you decided what buildings to try to knock down or cars to eat or whatever it was, and it was a blast.
Great looking game too, for the time at least.
Well, and I was exactly the demographic for it, because I was like a 9 or 10 year old boy in particular back in 1981. It was like crush, smash, destroy. I was like a Dalek.
I think you guys are talking about different games.
Maybe, are we?
Crush, Crumble, and Chomp, I think, was an Epix game, like
yes.
80, 81. And I think when you're talking about the movie monster game,
yes,
which was also
yes.
Epix, but I think that's like 85 or 86.
86.
Because that's
it
isometric
was a remake.
Okay, yes, all right.
I know my games.
There were a lot of similarities. They weren't quite exactly the same, but even the original one was relatively impressive, I thought, especially at the time. It was actually, it was a blast. It was so much fun to play, and I think that would be my choice.
That's a great one. Yeah, Crush, Crumble, and Chomp is a fantastic game.
Yeah, that's interesting. I didn't actually realize there was sort of two versions of that game. I've always had heard about both of them, but I sort of assumed everybody was talking about the movie monster game, the latter one.
Yeah.
So, and yeah, which honestly, both of them are definitely good examples of underappreciated games. They are ones that you never hear about on the blogs and so on. Excellent choice. Let's see. I guess I'm really just fishing for content here for our weird gaming segment on the show. My choice. Well, let's see. I've got a couple that I'm going to throw out. One of them, of course, is no longer obscure or unheard of because I used it on our last month's segment of Weird Gaming, and that was the Task Force Swear Hack. Eric, you were a GS person. Did you played Task Force?
Oh, I loved Task Force.
Awesome.
I played the hell out of that game. It was actually, that was an incredibly impressive game, and it was one that really sold me on the potential for the GS to be a great gaming machine in a way it didn't quite achieve because of the tides of how Apple handled certain things and whatnot. But it was really awesome.
Yeah, for sure. I always like to say how there were sort of 3 tiers of GS games. There was the crappy 8-bit ports, and then there was the games that were made originally for the GS, but were just sort of done in a naive way. So they had 16 colors, and they were just sort of low frame rate, and they looked kind of pretty in screenshots, but there wasn't much there, and they were kind of crippled by the low clock speed. And then there was that 3rd tier of games from, you know, groups like the Toolbox folks and FTA and Ninja Force and so on, where they did all of the tricks that were needed to get quality, you know, full screen scrolling, large sprites and everything. And Task Force was thoroughly in that 3rd camp. So
I've always loved Task Force in this collection of really fantastic GS games with like Thexter and Sylphie. Those were so well done in terms of handling, you know, GS graphics and sound capabilities in a way that just blended together and really put out a game that was better than the platform should have been able to do.
yeah, exactly. Rastan was another good example of that, or Sensei, which we talked about a couple months ago on Open Apple. So, yeah, and so the Task Force Swore Hack, for anyone who may not have listened to last month's show, was a version of Task Force that someone put out that had all of the audio replaced with naughty words, and it made for a very kind of adult experience. And it was one that me and my friends loved it to death, and we played it exclusively as soon as we found it, of course, tittering with glee the whole time. And nearly to this day, I've yet to find anyone else who's ever heard of it. Now, recently on the Apple II Enthusiasts Facebook group, it came up after our last month's episode, and someone else in the group had, in fact, heard of it, and in fact had a copy of it that they imaged. So that's very exciting. That was something that I was afraid was going to be lost to history. I still have the floppy of it, but it's buried in a basement somewhere, and may or may not still be readable. So that's my first one, which I'll throw out now. The second one I want to throw out is another GS game called Life and Death. And a lot of people know this one from other platforms, but it's a game that a lot of people, I think, may not realize was on the GS. And it was a very bizarre surgery game of the sort that you never saw before and rarely since. So you played the role of a surgeon, and you had to actually perform surgeries on patients. And it was all very realistic and graphic. You had to apply the antiseptics in the scalpel, and there was lots of blood and things. It was all quite gnarly, and especially if, like so many of us, you pirated all of these games and didn't have any instructions. So you had to do everything exactly right, or the patient died. So there was
You killed a lot of people, didn't you?
Oh yes, yes. The horror. You have no idea. And it had a lot of very strange quirks, like the patient would get an infection if your scalpel cuts weren't very clean and nice, but you had to do this with the 2GS mouse, which was not very easy to make a clean and nice line with the 2GS mouse. And so there was lots of senseless death from that. So to all of those virtual people, I'm very sorry. I think I did finally succeed in getting an appendix out. That was the introductory surgery, and it went up from there as you became a more advanced doctor in this hospital. But it was a very expensive lesson to get there for many
I always thought that was a very strange idea for a game. I remember looking at the ads for that in Nibble and going, what? Why would anybody want to do this?
Yeah, the ads were a bit disturbing, actually. Lots of blood and gore there as well. Did anybody else ever see this game?
No, I've never heard of it. What was the name of it again?
Life and Death.
Wow.
It's a GS game.
Yeah.
What was actually available on several platforms.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it gained popularity on the Amiga, and it was one of those ones that was
it was one of those that was on the Amiga and the Atari ST and GS and a couple of others, I think.
Yeah, fun stuff. All right, so the last question I have for everybody is kind of a fun one. So recently we found out that Seth Rogen is possibly lined up to play Woz in the new Jobs movie, the formerly known as the Christian Bale Jobs movie, now the Jobs movie looking for a lead actor. Mike and I were wondering if there was a Woz movie, which of course we all think there should be, since these movies are all completely ignoring the first decade of the company's existence. If there was a Woz movie, who would you choose to play Woz in the Woz movie, and why? I'm going to start with Sarah this time.
Oh, jeez. Oh, that's a hard question. But I always cringe at the people they pick, because I always pick actors I really dislike to play people I like, and it makes me sad.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to think about that. I feel like Woz should play Woz, and especially he's been on TV now and Dancing with the Stars, but I probably have to think of a real actor.
All right, we'll pass on you for the moment. How about you, Carrington?
I think people should think outside the box and not necessarily cast somebody who just looks like Woz, but who could like embody the essence and creativity of Woz. And so I pick you, Quinn.
Okay.
Totally, I would completely go the other way. Cast Quinn, make a splash, make $1 million.
Wow, bold choice.
Let's make a movie.
All right, well, I'm on board. Assuming I can get a nice trailer. I want one of those like Ted Danson trailers with like the multiple fireplaces.
Naturally.
Very important.
It's not very Woz of you, though.
That's true. Well, but that's how good an actress I am, you see.
See, what a great choice I made in casting.
Sure. How about you, Chevy?
I'm thinking maybe Jason Segel or even Noah Wyle could do it. And I know he's played Jobs, but I could see him pulling off a Woz too, especially in early, much thinner Woz.
Yeah, Noah Wyle. I like that choice a lot. Very interesting. Imagining him with a beard, I think that works quite well as an early Woz. How about you, Sarah?
All right, I'm still thinking, but I would have to be somebody British. Just because, I don't know, British actors just seem cooler to me and more funny. Oh, I can't think of his name. Maybe the guy who plays Manny on Black Books. That guy would be cool.
Don't think I know him.
Yeah, he's also in, what is it? The zombie movie, Shaun of the Dead.
Oh, okay.
That guy.
Oh,
Nick Frost.
Maybe? That doesn't sound right. The guy with the long hair. Anyway, we'll have to IMDb it later. But yeah, probably somebody British, just for kicks. Why not?
Actually, you know what? Pegs. Yeah,
not
I
Simon
think we could do
Pegg.
it.
He's
Simon
one of the
Pegg.
more. He's not in as many of those movies.
Yeah, I know, but I think Simon Pegg could totally do it, though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, actually, maybe.
You just made me think of him because you mentioned
Okay.
Shaun of the Dead.
Right.
I think get a beard and a wig and let's also shake things up and cast Steve Ballmer as Walt
Oh my god.
and make him learn the proper way to do these things.
Developers.
But I'd go see it.
I have to lobotomize myself now, having heard you say that.
Who's that man with the sweaty armpits and the fake beard? Oh, it's supposed to be Woz. Okay. So I think my choice would be, anybody here watch *Halt and Catch Fire*?
Not yet. It's on my list.
So the guy who plays the engineer in that show, I don't know which actor it is, but when I watch that show, to me it looks exactly like a young Woz, and of course he's got the engineering thing down. So that would be my choice. Does anyone know that actor?
I've never even heard of the show.
Ah, okay. So
Really?
*Halt and Catch Fire*. It was on. They finished their first season a couple of months ago on AMC, and it's kind of a gritty drama in the style of it's like a modern like The Good Wife, or I would say The Walking Dead, but it's not obviously gory and filled with death, but that same sort of gritty lighting and visual style. But it's about the period of the early kind of 80s or mid 80s, I guess, roughly following the story of Compaq, these two folks who are trying to build a competitor to IBM using cloning the BIOS and various other dramatic things. It's a decent show. It's gotten quite a bit of play amongst us retro computing people, since we like to pick apart the facts and see if they got all their dates and places right. And there's also a lot of fun retro computers in the background, so it's kind of fun to see what's sitting on people's desks and so on.
It kind of lost me a bit at the end, though. It got super drama, like with actual fire and stuff. So I was like,
It did, yeah. And we were all kind of afraid that was going to happen, whether they were just going to let the interesting historical events speak for themselves or whether they were going to Hollywood it up. And, well, I think we know what
at the
happened.
very end, they Hollywooded it up, I think, for ratings, but I was a little disappointed.
Yeah, I think there's some doubt as to whether it's coming back. I don't...
It must not have worked for the ratings thing, because I've never heard of it.
Yeah, clearly they failed at their job, since you are clearly the center of their target demographic.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
I totally would have
but you
watched
are
this
the
thing if I'd heard of it. But
Yeah.
Yeah, they tried to make our beloved period in computer history interesting to the normals, and that may not be possible.
I think maybe if it had been an HBO show instead of AMC as well, like HBO has sort of more clout and more marketing and more presence. So
although, I mean,
helped it.
AMC's got, Mad Men and The Walking Dead and all that stuff going on these days, so
right.
they're not
Good
exactly
point.
ignored by the public. So
Yeah, I had high hopes for it because AMC has been doing some really bold things in the past few years with kind of this new gilded age of television, as they say. And it's certainly nicely produced. It's a very visually interesting TV show, and there is a lot of the history is close enough kind of thing. They certainly capture the feel of that period of fly-by-night and early startup computer companies. But they seem to be trying a little too hard to ramp up the drama. There's some crazy romances and things that don't make sense, and there's a lot of people yelling at each other and marriages collapsing for no good reason. And so they tried to cram I think the first season was only something like 8 episodes, and they tried to cram an awful lot of drama into those few episodes. So that may have been, again, a ratings gambit that didn't quite pay off. Well, that is the last question I have. Any other topics of conversation burning in anyone's minds for the end of 2014?
I just looked it up because it was bothering me. It's Bill Bailey.
Okay, good.
Oh, he's fantastic. I love Bill Bailey.
Yes, I could totally see him as a Woz.
He's very funny.
He'd be all set.
Yeah, he's got the look. He looks just
Al
like
Yankovic
Woz.
as Woz.
Oh, that would be awesome.
Good. I like that.
That would be kick-ass.
That would totally be amazing.
It'd have to be musical.
Woz the musical. I like that.
Woz the music.
Woz would like that too.
He would.
They had Car Talk
He would.
musical. Why not?
In fact, you could put what Woz in a bit part, background dancing.
Yes,
kind
of course,
thing.
he'd have to have a cameo in the movie for
Absolutely.
sure.
He could play himself in a flash forward or in a weird exhaustion fueled dream of things yet to come. It'd be awesome.
I just want to see Bill Bailey up in front of a crowd telling stories about buying $2 bills by the sheet and cutting them apart and giving them to people.
There you go.
I love the perforated sheets of $2 bills. I love
right.
that story.
It's a great story.
I wish I was cool enough to do that. The fact that I'm not cool enough to do things Woz does tells you a lot about how cool I'm not.
Yeah, you're in good company here, I think. Well, except for Carrington, he's cool.
Yeah, I'm pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's because he doesn't have the hair.
Right.
Exactly. I'm too cool for hair.
Yes.
Well, no, it's a matter of warm.
It's just your thermal mass and
thermal
dissipation is higher. Yeah.
Did you guys just wear toques up there?
Most of the time, yeah. Now, for instance.
Do they just slide right off your head because there's nothing? Do you have to use like double stick tape or something to?
No, they stay.
Oh.
It's toque.
Hey, you don't have to tell me.
Yeah, that's true, actually. You're as Canadian as me.
I am, although I don't currently own any toques. No, that's not true. I do have a couple. I just never wear them
There you go.
because I was smart enough to move south. All right, so before we wrap it up, any last thoughts for 2014 from our panel of Apple II enthusiasts?
I found it a very exciting year in particular for software stuff. Like there's the whole development stack that's been floating around now that makes it way easier to make stuff, which I found very exciting. But mostly it's been like not just last year Martin Hay putting out a game, but like Brian Peachy's games this year, like having real new games on real discs sold in real baggies is super crazy exciting to me and inspiring. So like that kind of stuff happened this year, and I think it's just totally amazing. So I'm looking forward to that continuing. It inspires me to try to pump out a game or something, and for me that was a real high point of the year. So 2014 is very much a year of new software.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because the software doesn't get quite the press that the hardware does. But like you say, yeah, Brian Peachy put out 2 new games from scratch that are actually both great. And there was another fellow whose name escapes me on the Apple II Facebook group who has just put out another game. I believe it's called Genius that also really looks great. And, these are old school games, regular high-res graphics in the works, really lots of effort there. And yeah, you mentioned the development stack, which of course you and I were both involved with. And I like that story because it's really the best of the community. You know, it was something that where, you know, one of us started it and someone else took it and built on it, and someone else took that and built on it, and the end result is greater than the sum of its parts. And sort of the power of community and open source and everything coming together to make something that hopefully will benefit lots of people. So
yeah, and you know, and that's the sort of thing which could be an enabler to make 2015 an even more amazing year, right? Because now that the tooling exists to make it easier for people to do development projects, programming projects for the Apple II, and to do it faster and more efficiently, hopefully we'll see even more cool stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully there will be a kind of a snowball effect there. Give people a little bit of a leg up.
Yeah, I think it was an exciting year. I got to go to my first Kansas Fest, yay. But I feel like I'm getting caught up now because I'm like just getting my head a little bit around hardware and starting to poke at stuff, so that's pretty cool. And I know it's not to be too much of a downer, and we had a lot of good luminaries pass away this year, but when I heard that Ralph, is it Bear, passed away, I remembered that we did have a Magnavox Odyssey 300, so I think that's my next, like, digging in my parents' basement over the holidays thing to see if it's still there. So that'll be interesting if I turn it up.
Nice. And yeah, and also both Bob Bishop and Doug Smith passed away this year,
Yes.
which is a real bummer in both cases.
Yep, and Mike Pfeiffer from Kali PPLE as well.
Yep.
That's right.
That is, alas, the nature of the this hobby, because it's, you know, old school, literally.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike and I have talked about that unfortunately that's going to get worse before it gets better. We're just at that age where the people that created this world that we love so much are now are not getting any younger. So hopefully,
and yet there's more documenting going on than ever. Like there's this stuff at archive.org and all these podcasts and like so many things out there that are at least sort of last minute grabbing and archiving things. So that's exciting.
And actually, you know, the thing that I was most impressed by in 2014, and I can't believe I didn't think of it earlier, is the JSMESS project. Building, you know, emulation, you know, using JavaScript and HTML5 in a browser is freaking kick-ass. And I say that both as a fan of, you know, retro computing and the Apple II in particular, and as a guy who works for a browser company among whose missions are optimization of things to enable that sort of thing, right? Gaming and high performance software built on the web platform. So that's just an amazing, amazing thing to see. And
it's amazing so far, but my mind boggles of where that's going to be. Like, it's just crazy what is going to come of that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, within the first, you know, year or year and a half of work, they've gotten it to where it is now. Imagine where it's going to be in another year. And it's not just, you know, improvements to JSMESS itself, but as the browsers continue to gain capability and performance and all of that, as we improve the underlying optimization technologies that JSMESS relies on, it's just going to be wow.
For sure, yeah. I love Jason Scott's goal of being able to simply hyperlink to any piece of old software. I think that is really the turning point where these experiences that we all had and remember so fondly and were so formative for us, being able to simply hotlink to that stuff from any document, any email, any website, that's the turning point where that becomes part of the culture for everyone now. We can finally share those experiences in a way that's so low friction that anybody, your coworkers in the office or your mom or whoever, can just click on that link and say, oh, this is LoadRunner, this is what you've been talking about.
Right.
Because right now, we really can't share those experiences with anyone but each other because the barrier to entry is so high. So I think Jason Scott's efforts and all the other fine folks at archive.org are really kicking ass on that one. Really, really looking forward to seeing where that goes. Imagine the possibilities of the next step after this, you know, deep linking, let's say. Imagine, you know, linking to a specific level in LoadRunner. You know, that's certainly possible. There's no reason that you couldn't come up with something like that once you've got that ability to run everything in a browser. There's all sorts of possibilities.
Actually, I think even bigger than that, because there's always the argument about emulation versus real hardware and such. So given enough time, there's no reason why in late in the evening I can't say I feel like playing LoadRunner and then just link to that, tell my super fast 3D printer in the morning, Apple II with LoadRunner, please. And there you go. And then when I'm done with it, it just melts back down to goo, and the next day it's an Altair.
Why, that sounds like what happens when I touch hardware. It melts down to goo.
Wow, that's a bold vision, Carrington. I think that might be more than a couple years away, but you never
Gotta
know.
think big. That's why I'm recasting the movie, and I'm Woz.
I see how it is.
I'm taking over.
It's all that big thinking that caused his hair to vanish.
Oh, I see. Yeah, he's running
It was
for
in the
cover.
way of all the big thinking.
Right, just jumped right out, fled for its life.
as everything eventually does.
Yeah.
So let's see. Has Sarah? What were your thoughts for the year? I think you.
Yeah, I think that was pretty much it, but I do agree that is it JSMESS? How are we pronouncing that now?
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. But yeah, I was just thinking, with my experience of trying to resurrect my Apple II joystick, that if we could get some modern equivalents of game controllers, that would be awesome. I'm still trying to get that to work the way I want it to, and it's been
Finding functional joysticks for Apple IIs is getting complicated.
Well, I have one. It's just not the one that I had, and it's just not the same. I want my cookie buttons. But if they could make new ones that worked like that, then you could have like new controllers with the JSMESS, and that would be really super awesome.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although another thing that happened this year that totally blew my mind that came via Open Apple was learning that Avery still makes labels for 5 1/4-inch discs.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, they do.
Trust me, I'm well
brain
aware of this.
exploded.
I bought them by the metric ton until not very long ago, so...
Yeah, we were quite tickled to find that not only do they still sell them, but you can also download a printer template from their website for those labels.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Which, of course, we linked to our show notes a few episodes ago. So, yeah, Sarah, I mean, I'll just echo your earlier sentiment about this being kind of my first year back in the Apple II community as well. And I can't believe it's only been, 6 months since K-Fest, and I feel like it's been forever. And it's been, again, for me as well, a year of kind of getting reacquainted with a lot of this stuff and getting back into everything and getting caught up with where everything is. It's so amazing how fast and how far everything has gone, from the emulators to all the hardware add-ons, the new things people have built and written for the machine. And just sort of relearning a lot of this stuff has been really interesting. I'd forgotten ProDOS commands and DOS 3.3 commands and just basic things, AppleSoft basic stuff. It's funny how much of it was actually still buried in my brain somewhere, but I also had to kind of relearn a lot of it. So that's been really a lot of fun to do that as well. All right. Well, thank you all very much for being here. This has been a lot of fun, and it's been a great 2014, and we're all looking forward to a great 2015. So until next month, this has been Open Apple.
All right. Well, obviously I was not there, but I'm imagining a great time was had by all, and I'll hear that shortly. In the meantime, we do have some news that we like to talk about. It's the Apple II, and so I guess, no news is really, really urgent news, but we still like to chat about it when we can. So let's dive right into that, Quinn.
Get what's new and exciting in retro computing with 2 News.
So I guess a follow-up from our last episode when we had the awesome interview with Randy. Mm-hmm. We talked about IO Silver, and we had said that it would be available imminently when the podcast aired, and imminently is now. IO Silver is now available. So have you downloaded it yet, Mike?
I have. In fact, I downloaded it within the first hour or so after Randy sent an email, and I guess I got it for cheap because it was supposed to be $2.99 and they had mispriced it at $1.99. So, Randy, I owe you $1. And when I'm saying that it's $1 or $2.99, I'm talking about the IO Silver itself is free, and if you want the retro upgrade, which gives you the Apple II version of it, then that's $2.99.
And you do want it because it's awesome.
It really is. It's a lot of fun. I don't know. It's been a long time since I remember playing IO Silver a lot on my original Apple II. And it's kind of confusing because it feels like this frantic arcade game, but it's actually sort of it's a strategy thing that you have to slow down and think about and take your time to plan out your moves carefully. So it's definitely challenging. And I know even the iOS version, which to me now feels very hard, has apparently been dumbed down from the original.
Yeah, and you can definitely see that. I wouldn't say dumbed down so much as eased the learning curve.
There you go. Yeah.
But yeah, you can definitely see the difference if you play the original in Virtual 2 or whatever. It's definitely tailored to a more modern audience with their shorter attention spans and less dedication to learning new things. I think it's really turned out great. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, and so that's available now on iOS, and will be, I guess they're planning an Android version sometime in the near future.
All right, so moving along, what's this next item here, Mike?
Another Apple One went up for auction. It went for $365,000, which actually was quite a bit less than the previous one, which was almost $1 million. The one that went a couple of months ago was in, I guess, better condition, and it had all the originals and the extras and was signed by Woz and all this stuff. And this one wasn't quite as fancy schmancy, but I think they were hoping it would get more than this. Still, $365,000 is a whole lot of money. And at the same time, Ron Wayne, the magical third co-founder of Apple, who was only with them for a few months and then sold out for like $800 or something like that. He had a handful of early Apple ephemera, and he auctioned that off. And I think he got $25,000 for all that. It was like the Apple II blueprints and a draft of the Apple I manual. And he was the one who designed the very first Apple logo, the one of Newton sitting under the tree. It's a big elaborate drawing. He was going to, I think he wanted to do that to supplement his Social Security. So I think $25,000 is probably a good price for all that.
Yeah, I wonder if this means we've reached peak Apple I pricing.
Possibly, or they just didn't wait long enough, although I'm not sure how. Obviously, I don't have the kind of finances it takes to be bidding in Christie's auctions or anything like that, but I don't know if it works like eBay where somebody else bid just below 900 and whatever thousand the other one went for was, and if so, then why didn't they just turn around and bid that on this one? It's always kind of a crapshoot trying to figure out, what it's going to go for and why maybe it didn't fetch as much. Some of them are obvious. There was the one that Joe Copson's estate tried to sell, and it was missing chips and broken and dirty. And that one, I think they started the auction at like $34,000 and didn't even make the minimum. But there's a reason for that. So.
Yeah, that early Apple logo is kind of a funny outlier in Apple's long history of strong branding. I remember seeing some old materials that had that logo on it when I got my 2 Plus back in, I think it was 79 or 80 or 81 and somewhere in there. And it was clearly not a very good brand icon. I mean, it was it was this sort of elaborate wood carving of Isaac Newton sitting under a tree and an apple in cursive script. And it was sort of so, even to a 10-year-old, it was sort of so obviously not a good choice for a corporate logo, but it's a pretty drawing.
It definitely catches the eye and kind of flares the imagination, but I don't know how you would stamp that into a plastic case and have it be anything more than a little black blob.
Definitely a strange choice, even to print, in black and white manuals of the day. It would have been probably fairly expensive, I would think, to print something that detailed.
And sort of as a corollary to those articles, obviously we'll have this all in the show notes, the New York Times had a profile of the Apple I technician that Christie's now uses to repair and clean and check all of these things and vet them for authenticity. His name is Corey. I forget what his last name is, but he hangs out over at Apple Fritter, and I think his username is Corey. Let me see here, Corey986. And there are a few threads over there in the Apple I forums where he kind of talks about, he goes into more depth about the processes that he uses to check the Apple I's and some history and things. Kind of neat.
Now, this Ron Wayne auction includes Apple II blueprints. Have you seen pictures? Are they actual blueprints from it?
I have not seen pictures of this. No,
Yeah, and with these high-dollar auctions, it's sometimes hard to find pictures of the items because they want you to show up at the event or whatever, so they don't necessarily want to show it to you up front. But yeah, I'm wondering, because it wouldn't be, unless they mean schematics, but those wouldn't be valuable because those came in every Apple II owner's manual. So I wonder if it's blueprints of the case or something like that, or CAD drawings of the case or something.
Well, it looks like, okay, so these are, I'm over on the Christie's.com has their description, and you can look at some of the, some photos of what's being sold there, and they're like maybe concept drawings of what the case might look like.
Okay. Kind of neat, I guess. I can't see myself doing that, but it's neat to see the stuff anyway.
Sure. A while back, well, I guess it's been about a year now, Jonathan Zuffi released his book called Iconic, which it's a series of, it's a set of really, really high quality photos of a lot of Apple gear. Not just Apple 1 and Apple 2, but through the Macintosh and things like that. Last year, you could, if you bought the special edition, I think was what it was, it came in this neat kind of spring-loaded plastic case that was modeled to look a little bit like the Apple II, the chamfers and angles and stuff like that. Well, he has updated the book with some new photos, new notes, and there's a new special edition that you can also order. So if you want to double dip, now's your chance.
Cool. I never get tired of Apple II coffee table books. So let's talk Beyonce, Mike.
Why would I want to talk Beyonce?
Because it's your news item. I'm tossing you softballs here. Swing at them. Swing at them.
Strike. A month or two ago, we talked about the musician who had recorded an album made entirely with an Apple II and a synth and a drum machine, and he released that recently. And I've got this news alert in Google for Apple II stuff, and this one popped up for some reason, and I thought, this is really odd, because it was an article about Beyonce and her sound engineer, a hip-hop guy named Young Guru, and I thought, this is, in the middle of all this, he just credits his getting an Apple II early in life with having changed his life, and I just thought that was kind of neat.
That is kind of neat. It's I like articles like this, because it's a reminder that the Apple II touched a lot of different kinds of people from all walks of life, not just us nerds and hobbyists and programmers and engineers. All sorts of quote-unquote normals were also affected by the Apple II.
The influence, I think, that the Apple II had on, well, obviously you and I, is still pretty strong. And he doesn't talk any more about it than that. I couldn't find any more expansion of the article where he talks about it, the setup or how he got it or anything. But kind of a random, wow, that's cool.
Do you suppose Young Guru is his given name, or is that perhaps...
You think that's on his birth certificate?
Yes. Is his mother Mrs. Guru?
It's entirely possible.
That would be pretty awesome.
Next time I see him, I'll ask.
All right, so moving along, one of the things I like to do here on Open Apple is snoop through our user mail. And last month we talked to listener Joshua, and he had some cool links in his email signature, which I, of course, clicked, as one is wont to do. And he had some cool stuff in there, so thanks, Joshua. One of the first one was something he calls AppleSoft in your browser. It's a JavaScript implementation of AppleSoft Basic. Now, this is neat. It's not exactly an Apple II emulator like you would think, but it opens up a window that you can type AppleSoft code into, and it will run it as though it was on an Apple II. And there's some amount of the hardware available. So, I was able to do some low-res graphics stuff. I didn't have any luck getting high-res graphics stuff to work, so it's sort of somewhere in the middle between an emulator of an Apple II and just a language environment. So it's a kind of a neat toy. And
that's really cool.
Yeah, worth playing with for a little bit. It might be useful if you have a big, elaborate AppleSoft program. It might be useful just to use to test out, just because it might be easier than typing it into your Apple II. I don't know, you could paste it in there maybe.
Because this is JavaScript and not Flash, will this run on, say, Safari or Chrome on your iPad?
That is an excellent question. I didn't think to test that, but yeah, I would think it should for sure, yeah. So the second item they had in there is even cooler. It's an older project, but still definitely worth looking at. It's a kind of desktop streaming for the Apple II, sort of like VNC or Remote Desktop on OS X. It's very cool. It starts out a bit like ADT Pro, where you connect your Apple II with a serial cable to, say, your Mac or your Windows machine. I actually think it's Windows only. And you run some software on the Windows machine, and it downloads itself through the ROM monitor, similar to how the ADT Pro Bootstrap does. And then it sets up this program on the Apple II, which receives high-res images, and the Windows PC is sampling the screen and down-resing it and converting it to, the 6-color high-res screen format, and then sending it over. What he shows on his site is kind of a first draft, so there's no compression or anything involved, so it's a little bit slow, but it definitely could be made faster with some effort. So he's getting about 1 frame per second right now, but it's pretty cool. You can actually see his desktop updating, his Windows desktop. In fact, he loads up Second Life and plays some Second Life on his Apple II through this remote desktop. And he's got some input going bidirectionally and everything. It's actually surprisingly cool. So I was surprised I hadn't heard about this before.
Wow, that's neat.
The video is quite fun to watch, so definitely worth checking out.
So I've been thinking about, you've had all these new segments started in our show, and I think they're cool and awesome, but I'm a little bit jealous. So I think I'm going to start one myself, because we talk about WOZ News, WOZ every month, it seems, and it's always several things that we talk about. I figured we'd have a WOZ News segment. We'll call it Woos.
I'm on board with the WOZ segment. Let's talk about the name.
Oh, you don't like that?
Yeah, we'll talk.
All right.
We'll table that for now.
Okay. All right. Well, in the meantime, we do have some WOZ stuff to talk about. WOZ is apparently getting his own reality show. It's going to be about future technology, and there's not a whole lot else about it, other than speculation, I think, on the web right now. But if he makes it, I will watch it.
The article, which of course we'll link to for what it's worth, is a little bit disappointing. It's fairly empty of information, but there's a fun picture of him and Carrie Byron. Those are two of my favorite people, so nice to see them in a photo together.
Quinn?
Mike?
Did you know that Apple did not start in a garage?
You know, I don't believe you, because everyone has always told me that they did.
Well, WOZ says they didn't. He sat down for an interview with Bloomberg, and the interviewer brought up the question of what it was like in the garage. And WOZ says, well, actually, it really wasn't much going on in the garage. There was a bench there, and there were a couple of people that tested a couple of the designs as we did them, but they really didn't do a lot. Most of the work was done at his desk at HP and in other places. So kind of smashing a pleasant childhood memory, I guess.
This video, it's got one of my favorite bits in this is that, of course, they show the house where the alleged garage was, and there's a big sign on the lawn saying, please go away, basically.
The house is owned by Steve Jobs' sister. Last year or the year before, the state of California decided to turn it into an historic landmark against her will, because I guess that means that in order to make any renovations or really major upgrades, she has to get permission from the state, and that's a big pain in the butt out there if you've ever dealt with California real estate and licensing and things like that. So she was not happy about that. There are plenty of pictures. If you do a Google image search, just Apple Garage, you'll see it there, but it sounds like not a whole lot happened there. There's a neat video that accompanies the article. It's WOZ, he's sitting talking, but part of it is him, and I don't know if this is his or they gave it to him, but it's this Apple IIe, and they plug it in, and he's kind of using it and fiddling around with it, and I don't know where they shot this thing. It looked like in an abandoned bomb shelter or something, because there's gray concrete behind him and stuff, but and the keys on the Apple IIe are all busted. But it was neat to see him play with an Apple II again, because when he came out for Kansas Fest in 2013, he wouldn't touch the Apple I or anything else. Yeah, kind of a neat video, and sad to, I guess, hear that it didn't start in a garage, but not really all that surprising. It's origin stories and legends get blown out of proportion and things. So.
Yeah, well, and the garage story, that garage origin story, is pretty deeply set in the American kind of pull yourself up by your own bootstraps sort of mythos. It's pretty deep in the psyche, I think, of Americans and, well, Canadians for that matter too. So Planet Money, the NPR show a while back, did a story about that, how it's such a big thing now that companies that didn't even really start in garages have sort of made up stories that they did to sort of create that same mythos, because it's so powerful that everybody wants to have this image of a scrappy underdog startup origin story, because it gives you, I think, a lot of heart with credibility with people, especially in America. So I'll see if I can link to that in the show notes. It's a great story. A lot of the big, especially the tech companies, Silicon Valley companies, a lot of them have created these stories. I think HP was a big one they talked about, where they went out and found their quote-unquote original garage and bought it for some obscene amount of money. Mm-hmm. And I think they even paid to move it or something, and it wasn't ever a part of their story. It was just sort of somewhat tangentially related to the founder. founders or something. Anyway, it's kind of a funny story of the length they've gone to create this garage startup story. So it sounds like Apple's was a little bit inflated also.
Not surprising, though.
Yeah.
Looks like you found Woz in a video.
I did, yeah. So this is a funny one. I was actually clicking through a newsletter at work that they send out, and it was a video about something completely unrelated, but YouTube does that thumbnail screen capture of the video to give you some idea what it is, and the screen capture was Woz's signature on a piece of wood. Of course, the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I was like, hello, what's this? And it turns out to be a video about, it's an oral history of sorts in a multi-part video series about the mini computer boom that took place in Boston in kind of the late 60s, I guess, and maybe very early 70s. So this is something, it's an interesting topic that I didn't really know much about. I guess before the microcomputer boom, there was a mini computer boom. And I suppose if a mini computer in this definition is roughly described as those computers that had the CPUs were built with discrete logic, so they had a CPU board as opposed to a single chip, and so things like DECs and I guess PDPs and those sorts of things. Apparently, I didn't know this, but that market was basically killed by single chip CPUs. So it's a pretty interesting story, and there's a lot of great cameos in it. Dan Bricklin is in it, and there's some great shots of Apple IIs in there, and as the aforementioned Woz signature is in there. So it's a fun watch and a very unexpected Woz cameo.
That's really cool. And if it sounds like we're stalking Woz, that's because we are, or at least I am. And in fact, if you want to stalk Woz, you can find everything that he's ever posted on any Kinja blog. I think Kinja is like a blog enhancement. I'm not real familiar with that particular title, but if you go to stevewoz.kinja.com, when he posts and uses his username, everything shows up there.
Cool. I wonder what's going to happen when we run out of made-up words for new tech stuff.
We'll just call them things like woos.
Oh, all right. I see. Nice try.
Aw.
Don't push your agenda.
Oh, man.
I said we'd put a pin in that and we'll come back to it.
Well, we did come back to it, just not when you wanted. I'm just gonna keep pushing.
I'm not saying it's a terrible idea. I'm just saying, yeah, it's a terrible idea. It's terrible. Yeah.
Okay. What else we got?
Let's see. Well, I suppose we should talk about the CFFA.
Tell me about the CFFA.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, for many of us, the CFFA 3000 run number 4 has been delayed until November 2015. And I think I can express a collective sad face for the Apple II community. Expect the prices to shoot up on eBay for a little while yet, for those of us who just can't wait.
It's not like you didn't have your chance, though. He's done a few runs. So.
It's true. Yeah, I really have no one to blame but myself. But I'm going to blame you anyway.
Well, you usually do.
You should have reminded me or bought one for me or something.
Well, I have 3 sitting here, and I will taunt you with them next time I see you.
Well, that doesn't sound pleasant, so I don't blame you. I blame Commodore. This is somehow Commodore's fault. Always is Commodore's fault.
We talked about Ron Lane earlier. Another early Apple employee is speaking out. Well, not speaking out because that makes it sound like he's protesting or something. Bill Fernandez did an interview over at techrepublic.com where he talks about some of his early memories of working, well, not in the garage, but working with Woz and Jobs and the others. I think it depends on who you ask and probably the time of day and whether the wind is blowing north or south. But I think he's officially employee number 1, but I'm not 100% sure about that. That could also be Dan Kotke, and it could also be Chris Espinoza and a couple of other people. But it's a neat interview, and it's nice to hear from somebody who doesn't normally talk a lot about Apple.
Yeah, I like these kinds of stories about the people that were sort of not the big names, but were sort of around the perimeter doing all the other stuff that you never hear about.
And were probably very important to Apple getting off the ground.
Definitely. So let's see. Let's talk about software a little bit. We've got Kevin Smallwood is GPLing the source code for GBBS Pro. So did you ever use a BBS running on GBBS Pro?
I dialed several of them. I didn't have my own running on that, and it's been a long time since I had those particular memories. GBBS Pro is sort of special, I guess, in the Apple II software world in that it's, for a long time, it's still one of those that you couldn't really get anymore because Kevin bought it from, I forget who he bought it from, but it's been kind of this, I bought it from this guy who bought it from this guy. And he's been up until recently actively kind of protecting it and saying, please don't post this anywhere. And I know at one point he was thinking about selling the rights to the program. Doesn't look like maybe that happened, but I know he's working with Tony Diaz now to finally get this out there where people can have it and use it and enjoy it. Because for a long time, you couldn't download it from, like, say, Asimov, but you couldn't buy it from Kevin either, because Kevin was, I forget how the narrative went, but basically he wasn't prepared to sell any new licenses for it. So if you wanted that particular piece of software, you were kind of out of luck. And I know that popular one, because there were a lot of add-ons, and it was something you could go in and really customize the heck out of. And it was a robust and common platform back in the day. So people kind of wanted to get their hands on it. It had been frustrating up to this point. So this is good news.
Yeah, that's cool. I always like to hear about anything being open sourced. So for anyone who isn't aware, GPL, by that we mean GNU Public License, which is sort of the most hippie, openest form of open source software, where basically you can do whatever you want with it, but nobody's ever allowed to make any money on it ever again.
Kevin announced that over on Facebook, and if we can't link directly to the Facebook post, I know that Call Apple and HE Central both posted about it. So personally, I'd like to say thank you to Kevin, and Kevin announced that he's doing this with Tony Diaz. So thank you to both of them for making this happen.
And who knows, maybe this will spark a resurgence in BBS stuff. That's kind of the one area of retro computing which I feel is still a little bit underserved, just because I guess it's so difficult without the infrastructure to run BBSs and get people to dial into them. So I know there's the telnetting business and so on, but it's just not the same.
Yeah, you just got to have that modem noise.
Yeah, the modem noise is so important. And then just, I don't know, it feels like if I'm running through my other computer, then I might as well just be using that computer on the internet. I don't know. It just feels like cheating or something. I don't know.
Just blech.
Yeah, me. Apparently, I'm a BBS snob all of a sudden. I don't know.
Wow.
I don't know when that happened.
If you've been paying attention at all to the news lately, you probably are aware that Sony got hacked, and I don't think we need to talk about the politics behind that or the specifics, but the hackers who did this have released several packets, I guess, large packets of the data that Sony had, and a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff. And one of the things that has emerged was kind of the turmoil that was going on with their Steve Jobs movie. Because a couple of years ago, when they first announced, probably right after he died, that they were going to be making these biopics about Steve Jobs, there were two of them that were announced right around the same time. One of them, the one that starred Ashton Kutcher, has already been made, gone to the theaters, and you can buy it now for $2 or whatever on iTunes. But the other one, the Sorkin picture, has just kind of been lingering out there. And as it goes with Hollywood, us commoners generally don't get to hear about a whole lot. Sometimes stuff just goes away and you never know the details. But because of this hack, we do get to catch a glimpse of what's been going on there. And I guess Sorkin wanted Tom Cruise to play Jobs, and the studio said no. And they wanted Christian Bale, and when Bale was on, they were happy about that, but then he dropped out. And I guess that the way the budgets work is that the caliber of the star you get has a lot to do with how much money you get from the studio to make the movie. So when he quit and they signed Michael Fassbender, the project lost like $25 million that they were going to get from Sony. And it's kind of this ugly sordid tale, and now it's over at Universal Pictures, and Natalie Portman was going to do it, and now she's not. So it's just been this crazy wild ride. So we may never actually get to see this.
Yeah, and that's the one that was going to have Seth Rogen in it, right?
Yes.
So that's kind of a funny common thread, because as we're recording this, this Sony hack has blown up in another form, in the form of this interview movie with Rogen and Franco about North Korea. Theaters are refusing to show it because of some sort of vaguely defined threats or something, and it's this whole big foofara, and who knows what's really going on, but it's all very strange.
Sad to see. I don't know if we need another Jobs movie. I do like Aaron Sorkin's the stuff that he's written in the past. I've always kind of enjoyed. I know The West Wing was very good, and I enjoyed that Facebook movie. So I was kind of looking forward to this, and it may not happen, but if it does, I will go see it.
I'm with you on the world not needing another Jobs movie, but
so you're probably not going to go see it, in other words.
Yeah, honestly, I haven't seen any of them, to be honest. I just don't feel like that's the interesting half of the Apple story, but obviously I'm biased. That's why this isn't a Mac podcast, I guess. Or maybe an iPhone podcast.
I think there's a bunch of those already.
I bet there are many more iPhone podcasts than there are Apple II podcasts.
Probably so.
If there's more than one. Yeah, that's right, Carrington. I said one.
Wow. Direct attack. All
Yeah.
right.
I'm bitter because he said he's got like 3 episodes in the can, so he's apparently just sitting on them. So, shall we wrap up the news then and move on to some user feedback?
Oh, sure. Why not?
All right, so we only have one letter this month because apparently our users don't like to talk to us. Maybe we smell bad, I don't know.
Boo us.
So we got a follow-up from Josh with regards to the Traveler module that we talked about last month that was recovered from some floppies in a magic window file. And I think we alluded to or suggested that perhaps those would be available in PDF form online, and that turns out not to be the case, which is why if you went looking for that link in the show notes, it wasn't there, unfortunately. We spoke a little too soon on that one. It looks like Mark, the author of Traveler, actually has plans for those documents, so he didn't want to release them. They'll probably be available on DriveThruRPG, which is a service, or possibly some other product that is related to that in the future. Apparently, the module in question that was discovered is called Manhunt Part 1 of the, I'm going to say, Onsium quest. I don't know how to pronounce that word. For Mega Traveler. So, in any case, we will continue to follow that story because it is interesting, both to Mike for the Traveler aspect and to me for the cool recovered data format. Woo! And we'll continue to, post updates as we get them.
Can't wait.
So, Mike, what's up for Weird Gaming this month?
Well, I thought it'd be fun to talk a little bit about alternate reality, the series that never really happened. Alternate Reality was a game designed by Philip Price, and there were 2 games in total that were published. There was the City and the Dungeon. He had these really big plans. It was going to be this elaborate ongoing series. I think there were going to be 7 games in the series total. There was the City, the Dungeon, and a bunch out in the wilderness and places like that. The grand designs that Philip had unfortunately never came to fruition because it was getting more and more expensive and taking longer and longer, and they kind of pulled the plug on it. And Philip understandably was angry, and in fact he left the game design industry because he was so distraught over this. It's kind of this unfinished masterpiece. I don't know if you ever played it. The images, the disc images, I know for a long time, the ones that were on Asimov didn't work. And it was kind of a hunt. I think they've been cracked and are now available and actually playable. There's some neat music in there, and it's a forward-looking RPG similar to The Bard's Tale, and I highly recommend playing that.
That's really cool. That's a great find, Mike. It's not often we get to see this kind of stuff. I mean, just like today, for every piece of software that is released, there's, a dozen that weren't finished for various reasons or were canceled or whatever, or the company went under or whatever. So you never get to see that stuff. All kinds of 3/4 finished products have vanished into the ether and we'll never know about them. So it's cool to see one like this that managed to somehow escape the void.
Yeah, and it would have been neat, I think, to see what Philip wanted to do with the rest of the games. His designs, his grand imagination, I think, was probably a little bit heavier than the 2 megahertz 48K computers of the day could handle. But he was talking about doing 3D, fully textured map graphics and this orchestral soundtrack and some neat stuff. And who knows, maybe if he'd drawn it out long enough, the technology would have caught up. But we will never know.
Yeah, it could have been the Duke Nukem Forever of its day.
That's right.
If he'd just had it in production for 20 years, the hardware would have caught up with his ideas.
Exactly. But there's a quick little interview with Philip Price over at dadgum.com. We'll have the link in the show notes, and he kind of talks about what he'd hoped would happen and what really happened and what he's doing now, or when this interview was done. So
awesome. Well, good find. So a quick follow-up to our Weird Gaming segment from last month. I don't think we've talked about this since then. We talked about the last time the Task Force Swear Hack. And I was talking about how it may have been lost forever if the floppy copy of it in my parents' basement is not still readable. Well, Apple II community to the rescue. Someone else out there does in fact have it, and they managed to image it, and it is now available. So I will dig up that link, and I believe they put it on Asimov. So I will dig up that link and definitely have it in the show notes. It's not to be missed. As one of the Facebook group commenters said, it's these things are never quite as exciting in reality as you remember them. So it's not quite as graphic and crazy as I remembered it in my youth, but it's still fun to see it. It's still a weird thing.
You can giggle like a kid at all the naughty swears.
That's right. The bad words. Of course, nowadays a primetime AMC show makes it look like a Disney movie, but
no kidding.
the times they have changed. So I'll throw one more element or item into the weird gaming segment, which I've been wanting to talk about for a while. It's not exactly a weird game, but, well, it is weird, but it's not uncommon, let's say. And that's the Bilestowed. Now, surely, Mike, you must have played the Bilestowed.
Well, sort of.
Sort of. Yeah, that's the thing. I don't think anyone's really played it because very few people understand it.
Right, because like me, most of us probably had the pirated disc and stuck it in and went, what on earth is this game? And kind of, did the let's hit every key and see what it does. And sometimes the keys did some things and sometimes they did others, but I never had a manual, so it never made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I love this thing because it's the quintessential early 80s game. It's just shamelessly, fearlessly experimental and bold and just trying crazy ideas left and right. And the end result is not exactly playable, but you have to really admire what it is. It's also a quintessential Apple II game, which is also what I love about it. So just in case some of our listeners have not heard of this or played it, it's basically a top-down gladiator game for 2 players, and you're on an island. It's actually a series of islands that you move from one to the next, and you control a top-down big muscled warrior guy with an axe and a shield, and you have an obscene amount of controls with which to manipulate this soldier, fighter, warrior dude. You literally control every joint on his body with a block of 9 keys on your keyboard.
Wow.
And and not only that, but the controls are quite strange in the sense that, so to move your wrist, for example, you have 3 keys that move your wrist, and you have a left and a right and a center. And when you start moving, let's say your wrist to the left, it will continue moving until you hit the stop key. So there's a left or right and a stop key. So you have to sort of hit the right key to move it right and then hit stop to get it to stop moving right. So the controls, and if that sounds confusing, it's because it is. Now imagine that times 3 joints that you're trying to control and also move. And you don't just move in cardinal directions as you would imagine. You actually steer yourself sort of like a car. It's the controls are utterly baffling. But I did at the time actually spend a lot of time trying to get good at this. And it is possible to get good at it. The learning curve is very steep. The controls are very tricky. And the AI is quite good, so it's actually quite a challenge. You can play it by yourself against the AI, or you can play against another person. So there are some techniques to it. It helps to know the layout of the islands. I don't even know how many different islands. I never saw them all. There's many, many of them. After each round, you move on to the next island. And there's this weird moment where it gives you a code that you're supposed to look up, presumably in the manual, which I suppose is supposed to tell you something about the island. Maybe there was maps of each island in the manual. I don't know. There's this weird moment where it gives you this code, and you're supposed to look it up or something. But again, yeah, like you, I never had the original, so a lot of this didn't ever quite make sense. But it's really quite well written, this game. It's quite speedy for an Apple II game. It's almost full screen, top down scrolling, which they do with some clever tricks with the background. The way they render the background is quite clever. It's sort of a grid, so they move the lines and they don't have to move all the pixels. They just move the lines on a solid background, so it looks like all of the ground is moving. It's full of little tricks like that. It's really more of, it's easy to view it as an action game because it's 2 guys fighting, but it's really more of a strategy game. It's sort of, you have to envision your limbs as kind of troops in a unit that are kind of trying to work together to achieve an end. It's fairly it's a fairly slow pace. So once you get the hang of the controls, you can kind of do a lot of things at the same time. So yeah, very strange game.
This game has sort of I don't know if you call it a twist or not to its history, but John Romero, famous id Software programmer who got his start in Apple II gaming and worked at SoftTalk and things like that. One of the things John does now is he collects software, and I think he's still got his original Apple IIe up and running, and this is kind of one of his like golden trophies that he likes to show off to people. He's a big fan of this game. Over at his website, planetromero.com, he has a big blog entry about showing this game off, and I guess he's got the original 1982 gold label retail floppy. I guess it was because it was controversial because of the blood and the hack and slash, not really out there that much. I don't know if it was because stores wouldn't sell it or parents wouldn't buy it, but finding an original copy of the BIOS to these days is almost impossible, and he's got one, and he has a neat little write-up over there, so we'll have the link to the show notes.
That's cool. Yeah, that's a really key point that I missed in my little description there, is that, yeah, there's a fairly startling for the time amount of blood in it. Every time you get a wound, it bleeds like a sieve, and you can actually chop off limbs and they remain on the ground bleeding, and it's really quite gory, or as gory as 6 colors of high res at 1 megahertz can be. I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who owned a copy of this. As you say, it was so uncommon. I never saw it in a store. Not that I would have bought it as a teenager, even if I had seen it, but yeah, I never saw it anywhere. So it was a bit of an underground weird thing, this game.
According to John's notes here, it was so controversial that the programmer was written by a guy named Mark Goodman. And it was so controversial that he had to use a nom de plume, which was, if you boot this thing up, it'll say it was written by Mangrove Earth Shoe. Because he wanted to continue publishing other games as Mark Goodman and was worried that the stigma would prevent him from working in the games industry after that. Of course, he never actually did anything after that, which is kind of sad. But he says... Mark was attempting to play the song Fur Elise while simultaneously running a game. On the Apple II, this was one of the most difficult programming tasks, and very few programmers got it working right. So that's kind of what that noise is in the background.
Oh, I didn't know that. And I always wondered about the name of the author. It was always so strange. I just assumed it was a cracker name or something, but that's a funny piece of the story. Little did he know, it actually probably would have helped his career considerably to have owned up to the Bilestone.
Yeah.
Similar to the Task Force hack. Of course, even the most basic form of Grand Theft Auto makes Bilestone look like a Bambi story. But all right, so moving right along. I just have to say I really like that segment. It's probably my favorite new thing that we're doing.
Is it as cool as Woo's?
Wow. Wow. I just, Don't make me find you a new co-host.
Oh, man.
You notice that I didn't threaten to kick you off the show. I threatened to leave. I've learned my lesson.
The show, yes.
That's right. I've learned my lesson. I'm not threatening to quit. I am threatening. I'm not threatening to fire you. I'm threatening to quit. Yeah.
I'm going to organize an email campaign to get you to call it Woo's.
You should organize an email campaign just so we get email, because we feel all sad that nobody wrote us this month.
That's true. Yeah. Any email at all would be great, because we're lonely.
Yeah, maybe it's because we're not actually giving out our email address enough. We should do that more. So write us at podcast@open-apple.net. All right, moving right along. Tech segment, right? Is our next thing?
I think that's our next thing.
Yeah, all right. So in tech this month, I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about. The first is a nice little display that I found. I've been working with my 2C Plus, and of course, one of the things many of us need for these machines is a monitor. And Apple IIs are a little bit tricky this way because the NTSC video that they put out is not exactly NTSC. Woz did some tricks, as he was wont to do, with reducing chip count and so on. And of course, the way he used artifact color instead of real color in the video signal. It can be tricky to find a monitor that can render Apple II video nicely, especially more modern displays. If you can find a display from, maybe the late 90s or something, the most modern ones that still had composite video ports on them, they tend to be fussier about the video standards than the older stuff was. So, in the 80s, every computer played pretty fast and loose with video standards. Nowadays, they're a little fussier. So I went through a couple of things trying to find something that would render 2C video nicely, and I found this thing. It's called the Night Owl Security Monitor. It's quite cheap. I got it on Amazon for $80, I think, and it's a nice size. Yeah, it's surprisingly tricky to find medium-sized 4:3 aspect ratio LCDs.
Yeah.
It's really tricky because LCDs came around kind of right at the tail end of the 4:3 aspect standard, and then 16:9 became the standard quite quickly after that, and then LCDs got quite cheap right in that same period, so they all got quite large in a hurry. So you can find 19 or 20-inch 4:3 LCDs from a few years ago, and then you can find all manner of 16:9 screens, but it's hard to find like a 10 or 11-inch 4:3 LCD. That's just like a white elephant. So this thing is quite a good find. It's 8 inches in size. It's actually got 2 inputs on it, but you only need one because it's a security monitor. It's also, of course, hard to find anything that renders composite video anymore. So there's a couple of market segments that still do this. I did a bunch of research trying to find this thing. Security systems are one area that still use composite video. Another is car audio equipment frequently still does, backup cameras and that sort of stuff. And that's also often 4:3, not to be confused with the headrests, the seat headrests. Those are generally 16:9, but the backup camera screens that are designed to go in the dashboard are generally still 4:3. But I would avoid those because car stereo people are very deep-pocketed as a rule, and any product targeted at that market is just ridiculously overpriced. So I would avoid that. And the third market I found that still uses medium-sized 4:3 LCDs is point-of-sale terminals. So the things that employee at McDonald's is poking at when you order your Big Mac. Those are also a good option, although nowadays they tend to come with a built-in resistive touchscreen, which is sort of useless and also adds to the cost. So security monitor systems seems to be a good compromise of all of that. So I'll link to this thing in the show notes, and it makes an awesome Apple IIc display.
Wow, those are all great tips.
So the last thing I want to talk about in the tech segment is that hardware project that I mentioned at the top of the show.
Okay.
So this is something that I think a lot of people have wanted to do, and some have done in various forms. I was somewhat inspired by Charles Mangan's work with his 2C that he's been doing. He showed a prototype of this at KFest last year, where he had built a monitor into his 2C, built a small LCD in it that kind of flipped up. It was really cool. And so this is something similar. I'm calling it the Teddy Top as a working name, just because the Teddy was one of the code names for the 2C. And I'm working on a kind of a lid that goes on your 2C and kind of turns it into a laptop. So it's the size of the laptop, about 2 centimeters thick, or size of the machine rather. It sits on top and it holds a screen, an LCD screen inside. It covers the keyboard when it's closed, and you hinge it open. It's hinged at the back. It is entirely powered and run off the ports on the back of the machine. So right now I've got the prototype running on. I've got a prototype built with foam core that's running off the video port on my 2C, and I'm also incorporating the UNES disc from Nishida Radio, the SD card device for SmartPort and Disk 2 emulation. So I've got that incorporated as well. So it gives you kind of like, the idea is you stick this thing on top of your 2C, and it gives you kind of everything you want to take it on the road in one package. It's got your SD cards and your LCD and everything, and there's no extra power supplies or anything like that. It's all just built in. So, and the other thing I'm striving for is to make it non-destructive. So it actually just clamps in place non-destructively. There's no screws or cutting or anything of the machine. That's the goal anyway. I've got it all designed in the CAD, and I'm waiting for the 3D prints to come back. I'm 3D printing everything, and it should be coming back from Shapeways early in this coming year. I'll be continuing to talk about that on my blog, which I will link to in the show notes. I've got pictures and write-up on the development process of this thing. It's not a product that I'm going to sell necessarily, because it would be difficult and expensive to produce, but all of the files and everything is all going to be open source, so anybody can build one for themselves if they want. Wow,
that is super cool. I can't wait to see that in action.
Yeah, I really hope to have it done by Kansas Fest so I can bring it. That's part of the goal of this, is to have something I can bring to K-Fest. So before I'm done, hopefully it'll have some other neat features as well. But so far, for sure, it'll have LCD display in it, and probably also the SD card reader built in.
I love the fact that the hobbyist community is still, 30 some years after the Apple II, is still so passionate and interested in creating and making and sharing that we can have things like this and the stuff that Charles is doing and Reactive Micro is getting back into the game. And on the software side of the house, we've got guys like Ivan and Martin Hay coming up with cool hacks and fun stuff. It's kind of an exciting time to be an Apple II fan.
Yeah, it really is. And the enabling technology, of this, what people often call the maker movement, has really created this perfect storm with retro computing, where everybody's learning electronics and Arduinos and all this kind of stuff. And these old computers are perfect for that. It's the same level of technology, basically. So it's, this kind of low speed, simple digital logic. So it's so easy to meld the two. And then you combine that with this empowering kind of, decentralized additive manufacturing like 3D printing and things like that. And it unlocks all kinds of doors that, wouldn't have been possible before. So it is a very exciting time to be playing with this stuff for sure.
And it doesn't hurt at all that Apple, was so open with documents and source code and schematics and just information about, Woz's open design. Here you go, pop the lid off and play. And we're still doing it now, and it's great to see.
That is not to be underestimated, the power of that. I mean, when I was designing this system, I was able to find the pinouts for the drive port and the video expansion port, and I was able to deduce or look up the current limits, on the video expansion port to know how much, I can drive off of it, and all these sorts of things. Without that information, this just wouldn't be possible. So, and that wasn't stuff that I had to dig up on the internet. That was in the manual. So, you're certainly not going to get that nowadays. And, I have my Apple II Plus schematic hanging on my wall, and it's, I refer to it all the time for various little projects. So, that's great. And the other thing that's a big enabler here is the collaborative tools that we have now that wouldn't have been possible at the time. Like Charles has done this amazing 3D rendering of the Apple IIc, and it's, I believe, 1/4 or 1/2 scale, and he's great at building these things. It's so accurate that I was actually able to do some basic design work. I built in CAD my Teddy Top prototype. I just built it on top of his model of the 2C. Wow. And my first test prints were really close. I only had to make a couple of tweaks, so that's speaks to how accurate his renderings or his models are. So, and he's just shared those for anyone to use. So that kind of collaboration is just really powerful. I mean, you look at this model, and I can't even imagine how long it took him to build it. He saved me a tremendous amount of work with that. So, and of course, Charles sells his models in physical form as Raspberry Pi cases and other fun things. Feel free to patronize his awesome work. That I'm sure would be much appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. It's really incredible to see all this happening. And I guess on that note, unless you have anything else.
No, I guess we should wish our listeners a happy holidays. Hopefully you're celebrating in whatever manner you're accustomed to with friends and or loved ones nearby. It's been a great year for Open Apple, and I'm really excited to have wrapped up the year with you as my new co-host, or me as your new co-host, I guess, technically. Look at that, I'm already taking over.
Well, that's why I brought you on. I'm eventually just going to sneak out the back door, and you won't even realize it. I would like to thank our roundtable guests, Carrington, Sheppy, and Sarah, for sitting down and talking Apple II with us for a little while. I think we'll have a great 2015.
So until next time, from the Open Apple World Headquarters, have a happy holidays and a happy new year, and we will talk to you all next time.
Woos.
This has been the Open Apple Podcast. Find more episodes, read our blog, or send feedback by visiting us on the web at www.open-apple.net. I
don't know, speak for yourself. The Apple II, I could take it or leave it at this point. didn't affect me that much. But since we're here, we might as well keep doing this.
I think you're a secret Commodore girl.
Yeah, could be. You know what? That's where the rage comes from. It might be I'm just jealous deep down.